You know, for decades, the fight against advanced bladder cancer it felt stuck. Progress was painfully slow, and the options were pretty limited. But all of a sudden, that's completely changed. We're in the middle of a genuine scientific revolution. With new treatments coming out so fast, they're actually creating a whole new set of challenges. So today, let's unpack this incredible, fast-moving story.
And this is really the core question we're going to explore. Because this isn't just about cool new drugs. It's about the really tough decisions doctors and patients are now facing. I mean, what do you do when a great new treatment comes along, and then it's immediately followed by one that looks even greater? How on earth do you choose? So here's our game plan. First up, we'll look at the breakthrough that basically set a whole new standard of care. Then, we're going to dive into the smart drug technology that's making all this happen. We'll zero in on a key target called HER2, tackle the new questions all this progress is raising, and finally, we'll look ahead at what's next in this wild, rapidly changing field.
Okay, let's dive right in. For what felt like an eternity, the treatment for muscle-invasive bladder cancer before surgery was just stagnant. Nothing was really changing. That is until one major trial came along and completely rewrote the rulebook.
And to really put this into perspective, a trial called the Niagara trial was the first positive phase 3 study in this exact setting in, get this, about 15 to 20 years. By adding an immunotherapy drug to the standard chemo, it created a brand new effective standard of care. It was just a massive step forward.
Okay, but here's where the story gets really wild. Almost immediately after this huge win, another treatment combo, called the EVP regimen, showed even more dramatic results in a different group of patients. Now, you can't compare the trials head-to-head, but that amazing survival benefit with EVP, well, it created an instant, very real dilemma for doctors. And this quote from Dr. Terence Friedlander at UCSF just hits the nail on the head. When you have two fantastic options, but one of them looks significantly better, the decision-making gets incredibly tricky. It's what you'd call a high-class problem for sure, but it is a real problem.
So what's the engine driving all this incredible progress? Well, a huge part of it is a revolutionary class of drugs called antibody-drug conjugates, or ADCs. And you really have to understand these to see where the future of cancer treatment is headed. So let's break down exactly how these smart drugs work.
The best way to think of an ADC is like a biological smart bomb or a guided missile. It has two main parts. First, there's an antibody, which is engineered to hunt for a very specific protein, a target, that sits on the surface of cancer cells, and then attached to it is a super potent chemotherapy drug, which we call the payload. And the process itself is just so clever. First, the antibody part acts like a heat-seeking missile and finds its target on a cancer cell. Second, once it locks on, the whole ADC gets pulled inside the cell. And third, and this is the key part, once it's inside, it releases that toxic payload, destroying the cancer cell from within, all while trying to leave the healthy cells around it alone. It's an incredibly elegant way to fight cancer.
Okay, so let's get specific now. One of the hottest targets in bladder cancer right now is a protein called HER2. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it's because it's been a famous target in other cancers, like breast cancer, for years. But now, these new ADCs are showing just how powerful it can be to go after HER2 in bladder cancer too.
So let's look at the first drug. It's called disitamab vedotin, or we'll just call it DV for short. This is a HER2 targeting ADC that was studied in a huge phase 3 trial over in China as a first treatment for advanced bladder cancer. And the results? They were honestly just stunning. I mean, just look at this data. The trial showed that using DV nearly doubled the median overall survival for patients when compared to the old standard chemotherapy. It jumped from around 12 months all the way to nearly 24 months. We're not talking about a small improvement here. That is a massive, massive leap forward. But here's where it gets even more exciting. The biggest surprise was that the drug didn't just work for patients with high levels of HER2 on their tumors, it also worked incredibly well in patients who only had low levels of the protein. And this is a total game changer, because it means that instead of just helping the 15 or 20% of patients with high HER2, this could potentially benefit more than half of all patients with bladder cancer. All right, but DV isn't the only player in the HER2 game. There's another ADC that's making huge waves. It's called trastuzumab deruxtecan, or TDXD. Now, this one is approved for patients whose cancer has already progressed through other treatments, and it is also showing incredible effectiveness. So get this. In patients with high levels of HER2, TDXD got a response in 56% of them. Now, to put that number in perspective, in this late-line setting, older chemotherapies might get you a 10 to 20% response rate, if you're lucky. So 56% is just phenomenal. It's so good, in fact, that the FDA approved the drug based on these results alone.
So you see the picture that's forming, right? We have multiple, highly effective new drugs. It's what people are calling an embarrassment of riches, which is fantastic news for patients. But it also brings a whole new set of really complex practical questions that oncologists are now trying to figure out every single day.
And it's not stopping at HER2. There are other ADCs being developed that go after totally different targets, like one called TROP2. So the treatment toolbox is just getting bigger and bigger, which of course only adds to the complexity of figuring out the right path for each patient.
This leaves doctors wrestling with some really tough fundamental questions. If you've got two amazing ADCs, which one do you use first? And since a lot of these can cause side effects like nerve damage, how do you manage that over multiple treatments? If the cancer stops responding, why? Is the target gone, or did the cell just figure out how to resist the payload? Answering these kinds of questions is the next great challenge.
So, after all that, where does this leave us? What's the big picture takeaway from this incredible period of change?
Well, for the first time in a very, very long time, the challenge is no longer a shortage of good treatments. The challenge is now optimization. The new frontier is all about figuring out the science of sequencing, learning how to use these powerful tools in the right order for the right patient to get the absolute best possible outcome.
And all of this really leads us to a final, powerful question. With this absolute explosion of targeted therapies, we are moving so far beyond a one-size-fits-all approach. We are right on the cusp of a new era, where treatment can be tailored to the specific molecular fingerprint of an individual's tumor. So, is personalized medicine finally the new reality for bladder cancer? The revolution is here, and the work to master it has only just begun.